Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge and I'm your host. I am an author of 11 books. I've been a CEO for the past 12 years. I am the founder of a startup set on data privacy that looked at rivaling the likes of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all wrapped up under one roof. I am an elite performance coach of going on over 18 years, working with some of the best athletes in Europe, the United States to Australia. Most specifically, though, with that background and is quite extensively complemented by, I am in fact the world's leading scientist on coach and athlete performance, specifically when we're talking about tennis, and it also uses tennis as a blueprint to carry off onto other sports. But most succinctly, we're talking about uncovering how to develop a top 10 ranking. And I'll say it again, my work has all been around and it has scientifically, so we're talking about statistically significant work that has uncovered how to develop a top 10 player. I am behind theories such as the optimal performance theory, the V by Dr. B, the rule of transference, coining such terms from barrier breaker to the golden rule, along with a slew of others. Each episode, though, Beyond Top 10 Tennis is all about diving into one of these books and really digging a bit deeper and sharing additional insights that really weren't possible to fit in, I guess, all those pages. Today's episode, I'm excited by it because it's really a topic close to my heart, and as it obviously has become custom, we'll get down to the nitty-gritty, share those insights, and I really want to get, to the bottom of those questions that, you may have asked me directly or indirectly, or you could just be thinking them. But in one way, shape or form, I can guarantee you I have been asked them over the years, and we're really going to unpack these ones because, again, this is a topic, it's just so close to my heart, and I'll tell you why shortly. Today's episode is set on jarring the body in sport. Is my child getting injured? It is one of my absolute favorite topics. Now, look, if you want to read along, follow along, we're on page 68 of The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success. And that is The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, a comprehensive discussion on developing elite coaches and players. I know in previous episodes we've been digging deeper and diving into this book, and let me tell you, we are definitely not done yet. And it's really powerful, and I think one of the key ingredients that makes me so excited about this book is that it's really simplified, and I say that in the best possible way, that it's really taken the science and just nailed it down so we can all understand it. Because even though I put my hand up to say I am a scientist and I did all that work, I'm still human. And again, from those episodes, previous ones, it's all about humanizing it, because there's nothing worse, and I can say this, than sitting down and really reading those scientific papers and getting lost in all the jargon, because sometimes even us just want something a bit more lighter. So, and it's not to say that I don't do that and I don't read that. I think they complement one another, but we're talking about how to reach that top 10 ranking, and which means we don't need to talk scientific jargon all the time, or only a really small portion of the time, because we really want to look at practical terms. So let's get into it. Before, though, I start reading an excerpt, for additional insights on, I guess, why this is such an important topic for me. I was that athlete. I was that 14-year-old that I'm going to say, I guess it was around that time I first got my first significant injury. And I remember, I think, pulling both of my calf muscles, and I just couldn't even walk. And then, fast forward a few years, and I think that something happened to my hip. Fast forward a year or two, and then it was my shoulder. And my shoulder really was, I guess, the end game in that respect. And I know I'm not alone in saying that, though I guess I'm sharing that to say, if you're sore, let's get ahead of that now. If you're a parent and your child has a bit of a niggle, a bit of an injury, we want to get ahead of that now so it doesn't sideline you. And I've also been that athlete that had issues with, I think, the most important part of our body, so my feet. And we're talking heel spurs, plantar fasciitis, and it ended up being debilitating. And we're talking about, that was late teens, early 20s. So when it comes to injuries, I've had my fair share, probably more than most, but that really pushed me to unwrap what, I guess, the technical parameters of sport is all about, and the education cycle that is wrapped up in all of that, and why so many coaches, do not necessarily understand the risks of injury, and that, whether intentionally or not, cause those injuries with their athletes. And I think the most fundamental / alarming, the good thing now, is that I know personally where those injuries were stemmed from. And unfortunately, it was my technique, and it was what I was being taught to do. And as that adolescent child, I just listened to what I was told. And most children, athletes, players, if you're out there, you're probably doing the same. And if you're a parent, you're doing the same as well. I can't tell you how many parents I've had come up to me over the years, heartbroken about their child being injured, having to take time off from training, from playing, competing, and their coach just being none the wiser, not taking that responsibility, not upskilling to just really figure out how they can adjust the technique and just upskill so it's not something they're repeating to other athletes. But more so than myself coming in and really having to break down their technique, the player's technique, to reestablish the fundamental foundations. And sometimes it's almost, you've got to scrap it all back and rebuild. And the most powerful thing we know now is that if we're building the foundations at the very beginning, when you're learning the sport of choice, whether it's tennis or another sport, the best part is you get to build and build and build, which means you're not necessarily having to build, break down, and continue along that cycle, along with the injuries that come with it. And we know that whether you are a WTA or ATP tour player, the number of injuries on tour, it's still heartbreaking. If you're a club coach or you're playing at an academy, the number of injuries I still see, and it doesn't matter where in the world you are based, it's still happening. There are physios out there that love this field because you're coming to their offices every week, multiple times a week, some of you. And you know what? If you and me and how I was at that age, I was almost living in my physio's office. That's 2-3 times every week, putting the hard work in. And I guess the catch there for the parents is that no matter how hard your child puts in the work in the physio's office, if that coach is still conditioning the player, the athlete, the child to still perform the same behaviors, those techniques on court and the same movement patterns, they're still going to, more likely than not, either end up straight back in the physiotherapist's office, or eventually it will come. And if we can put in some really healthy key steps to begin with, we can lessen that, almost near mitigate it, but also set ourselves up to just be healthier in general, play the sport we love, hopefully following these, the pathway to the long game, progressing towards that professional level. Though I think most fundamentally, if you can stay healthy, stay conscious of your technical parameters, so how your body is moving, and if it is in line with, your optimized performance parameters as well, good. Next level is that we're going to just raise the bar, move the marker, progress forwards, and that's how we progress from one level to the next to find just that next level we're capable of with the right coach. And if you refer back to that coach-athlete relationship, but when we're looking at injuries, injury management, that's fundamental, though we really want to try to lessen the likelihood of developing an injury in the first place. Now, for the athletes, parents out there, if you are in that adolescent age bracket, this is critical. Now, I say that because most of us know and are familiar with when adolescence hits, that's when the body changes, irrespective, boys, girls, male, females, it happens. And the most important part for coaches to be mindful of, which means make sure you have a coach that is conscious of this, is that your technique has to adapt, because you have things from growing pains, sore knees because of that, sore backs because of that, sore hips. There's a bunch of ailments that come with that. They're not fun. They're just, let's say, part of life in that respect. Though it also means you have to be incredibly careful, because you're at a more vulnerable, growth phase, to accommodate your training load with the growing body. Now, a lot of adolescents, and it could be between, that 11, 12 through to that 16, 17 age bracket, if the load is not taken into account, injuries happen. They just happen. Now, it's almost common sense, and I cannot tell you how many coaches are not mindful of this. It's overtraining. If you're at an academy and this is happening, just be mindful that your training load is accommodating that. And there's nothing brave about an athlete ignoring their pains. It's incredibly important to be taught on, if you're sore and you are that player, that child, the athlete, to be able to share that with your coach in a positive light, not negative, and to restructure potentially your current training load until it goes away. It's not just a case of a day off or 2 days off. You can restructure that load to still work towards your performance gains. Sometimes though, if you do not, and if you are not honest up front about that, you will be sidelined. You could be sidelined for weeks, it could be months, and it could be, for that 6 to 8 months. It could be worse if it's incredibly severe. Though, if you go, okay, ouch, I'm a bit stiff in my shoulder, please tell your parent and or guardian, and please have the conversation with your coach to modify your training. Rest, yes, until that goes away, yes please, then modify the training. And that is just, it's so essential that when you're looking at that right partnership between coach and athlete or coach and player, and also for the parents, guardians to be conscious of this, to make sure there is a conscious awareness around injury management, but also mitigating it or managing how to limit this from happening, and that growth stage that we all go through, and that there is a healthy understanding about managing that. To the parents who have witnessed their child progress through their sport of choice over the years, what would you have liked to ask your child's coach that you never did? When I was initially asked this question to a parent, the answer was that they wanted to know if a certain movement in that sport jarred the player's body, and if their child was getting injured as a result of playing or performing this way over and over again. The answer to this, however, isn't so simple. There is a yes and no response. This is such a fundamental element to be conscious of, because I can't tell you how many parents have come to me over the years wondering why their child is injured. Now, this can go all the way to the extreme of an adolescent going through a growth spurt and developing a spinal injury. And we're talking a fracture in that area, because if we're talking about tennis, they could have been developing a kick serve and putting that extra load on their spine without doing the conditioning to prepare the body for that. Now, a lot of adolescents or developmental players in this age bracket are not doing enough conditioning to develop their body for the load. Now, these are good practices to integrate at an earlier age in this bracket that stems through the next 10 plus years of play, which ideally is 15, 20 plus, because we're talking about a child player athlete that's 12, 13 years of age towards hitting those early 20s and then playing through their early 30s even. Only if they're managing their body in the right way, which means they're looking after it and putting in that right conditioning. Now, some clubs and or academies have the right conditioning in place, which is exceptional. That's great. That has changed over the last 10 years. But it is incredibly important to make sure you're having those discussions with your coach, but then also the person responsible for the conditioning. Now, it may also be your coach, which is completely okay. That's great. Though make sure you're having the discussions with the coach that they know or they are conscious of the conditioning framework and at what age is capable of this and that. And I think most specifically, what load can I use? Now, at that age, more often than not, we're talking about body weight. We're not talking about hitting the gym and putting, the dumbbells and the barbells and swinging them around and lifting big. That is not the case whatsoever. So, this is very important to be conscious of. Though we're not going to specifically dive into that now. It's more so just highlighting how important it is to have a team. So remember the triangle about the parent, guardian, the coach, and the athlete or player. Being conscious of that development and how important conditioning is to mitigate the likelihood of developing an injury. That's one part of it. Obviously, a significant other part of that is the technical parameters. The most exciting element of my work to date feeds back into this. And I mean, I have spent the last 10 years writing about it, so it's so important, exciting, just fundamental, critical. Though, if you're serious about developing a top 10 ranking, it is directly correlated with specific movement parameters, which essentially means when we're looking at top 10 players over the last now 15 years and the differential there, we know what distinguishes them, and even now, and the direct correlations. But to simplify that, if you apply a specific technical parameter, the likelihood of you becoming a top 10 player significantly increases. And that goes on with the frequency. Why would a player question being placed in a position that would jar their body in the first place and, as a result, cause injury? First and foremost, the person responsible for teaching athletes how they should be positioned at a given time in their sport of choice is the coach, which then falls to the coach education provider. This is a big one because a lot of coach education providers have not upskilled their frameworks to the latest data. And I slightly touched on this in an earlier episode, and it was about whether or not coaching federations have access to this knowledge base. And the answer is no. And it is not a no by choice of, it's a no because the mindset of a lot of federations, so governing bodies, is that they work in-house, which means if you are external and their scientists have not uncovered this, then maybe they don't want to include it, which is incredibly disheartening when we're all trying to work together to build, I could be corny and say a better tomorrow, but it's true, because if we're putting health first and we're trying to support the athletes out there and the coaches out there working together to hopefully and potentially and most probably, if you have the right tools, not only become a professional athlete, but literally be equipped, scientifically, like literally be equipped to become a top 10 player. That's what it's all about. And because of that is why AMA International was built. And it's where the resources are kept, which allows, if you're a coach out there, you've got access. If you're a parent, you've got access. And if you're a player, you've got access. We are not excluding anyone. And I think the flip side, unfortunately, is federations, they have a set, let's say, ownership of what they do, and it is exclusive to those to be involved. Now, every country works a little bit differently, though there are a lot of, I guess, common themes worldwide, and that's okay. Though it's also saying that if you have not been, I guess, accepted under the wing into or under your federation, that's okay. Because not only do I know what that's like, I'm here to help in the best possible way. And I think that is just incredibly important for the parents out there, coaches and players to be conscious of, because there is such an extensive knowledge gap between what current federations, but also active coaching providers that also upskill coaches and what they have access to. on one hand, what they deliver, it's good. It's good. Is it great? It's not great. If you want great, you have to go outside. And I think, as in life, you can't get all of your answers just from under one hub. And that is, I think, the most important part, and where Beyond Top 10 Tennis comes in with that distinctive difference. Because again, when it comes to science and sharing it, that's one crowd. But being able to apply it and transition it to a broader perspective where it's applicable most specifically to a niche group. And if we want to say this niche group are top 10 tennis players, not current, but those who want to get there, and how we can in fact get them there. And if we draw it all back to today's topic around jarring the body in sport, and yet, is my child getting injured? If you're a parent out there, of course you don't want your child to get injured, because you know what? You've got the bills. You've got the physio bills out there, and you've got the chiro bills. You've got all the other bills that come with it, whichever is your choice of practitioner. The bills, and they're there. And that is the last thing you really want to go through, because it's heartbreaking for the player to go through, because it takes time away from them doing what they love, doing the sport that they really enjoy playing. I mean, if you're out there, if you don't enjoy it, choose another sport then. Okay, so I'm talking to those ones of you that you absolutely love your training and you love playing, regardless if you're on the court, in the field, in a pool, irrespective of where you are. You're doing it because you're thriving, and that you dream. And dreams are incredibly powerful, and dreams should be nurtured and nourished so they can flourish. I like that one. And I think if you can remember that, that's not only meant to be empowering and powerful, it's to say if you follow the pathway, it is possible. And to make sure that you're looking after your body as a whole to not only mitigate injuries, to set yourself up for success. If you want those optimal performances and the optimal performance outcomes, you need to put in the work also to look after your body, to condition your body, to protect your body, but also being mindful and have the knowledge about the technique you're using and if it is conducive to your performance. So for that, I mean, is it effective? Is it going to get you that end result also while looking after your body and not causing you an injury? So not at your detriment, which is incredibly important, because I can tell you what, I can walk into any tennis center out there and I can go injury. I can spot 99% of the children out there getting an injury, which breaks my heart. And it also pushed me and propelled me to start talking more about this. Okay, so for those of you who are listening, I'm sorry this is late, but for those who are also listening, we're here. Okay, we're going to wrap today's show up on that, because it's just so fundamental, and I'm sure you can see why I said at the very beginning, I'm just so passionate about this topic because it's so important. And I really hope you've got some key pieces out of here. And if anything, you can walk away going, I just need to be more mindful of my technique. I need to have that open dialogue and start the narrative with my coach about knowing what my body's doing and to upskill to make sure I'm not heading down the path of developing an injury. I'm heading down the path towards my end point, towards potentially securing that top 10 ranking, which we know is that 10, 20 years apart, depending what level, what stage of development you're at. But if you're a top 50 player, you want to make sure that your coach is on the same page and they know the V by Dr. B, so you can edge closer and closer towards the top 10. Because I will leave this episode on this. If you are a top 50 player and you do not know what the V by Dr. B is, when we look at science, we know statistically, scientifically, we know you are not getting into the top 10. And that is the heartbreaking truth. But it's also incredibly powerful, because if you get your hands on that V by Dr. B and you condition yourself and you just keep conditioning and it gets higher and higher in frequency and in your application through play, the likelihood of you crossing the threshold and embarking towards the top 10 is incredibly high. And I can't think of anything more exciting than that. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. As always, I really enjoyed myself, and I hope you did too. To grab a copy of The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, please head on over to AM8 International. That's am8international.com. Any comments or questions? I really hope you got a couple, or even more than a couple, coming from this episode. Please head on over to AM8 International or leave them on Topic Thread. That's topicthread.com, the only social network that I am on. Or you know what, for something different, head on over to Pink Octopus Books. That's pinkoctopusbooks.com. I will leave all the links in the bio, in the show notes. Most importantly, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, follow, like, share. It would be absolutely phenomenal. And thank you so much in advance. The more of you that do, the more players, athletes, coaches, parents out there can get informed and stay on the same page. And you know what? Really make those dreams come true. And it really is possible. And hey, we've got science on our side. I'm going to leave us on that note. So I'm so grateful. Thank you so much again for listening. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge. This is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I'll see you next time.